My project is on communication through Minoan peak sanctuaries in the Neopalatial period. The beacons are lit. Here's an overview of my project. First is the introduction to the project and an introduction to the Minoans of Crete. The goals for this project, the methods, the viewshed maps that were created, the results, further research after the results, the conclusions, and then some final thoughts. Since the inception of state-level society in the Bronze Age, Greece has been viewed as the birthplace of Western civilization. Because of its proximity to the Near East, the birthplace of state-level society, much of the technological and societal developments reached Greece before other regions of Europe. Greece was, in fact, the origin of the first state-level society in Europe, the Minoans of Crete, 3200 to 1450 BCE, or before the Common Era. This civilization is given the designation of a state-level society due to their implementation of palatial centers such as kenosis, the creation of their own language known as Linear A, beautiful art, for instance, the Minoan bull leaping fresco at Knossos, and a central religion, among other things. Archaeologists have subdivided the Minoans' timeline into 4 separate periods. First is the pre-palatial period from 3200 to 1900 BCE, and then the proto-palatial period, or the first palace period, from 1900 to 1700 BCE, the Neopalatial period, the new palace period, 1700 to 1450 BCE, and the post-palatial period, from 1450 to 1100 BCE. The harsh landscape of Crete is full of steep mountain ranges and deep ravines that create separate regions and cut off settlements from each other. Because of these difficulties, this state-level society would have had to develop complex communication systems capable of transporting messages over long distances in relatively short lengths of time. One relatively common site type that could possibly assist in the explanation of a communication network is the peak sanctuary. Peak sanctuaries were Minoan sites that were located on or near the peaks of tall mountains, near settlements where evidence of cult worship has been found, and as well as large ash deposits. They were at their height in the proto-palatial period, about 1900 to 1700 BCE, with William Megarry compiling a list of 21 peak sites. By the beginning of the Neopalatial period, however, he notes that only 11 peak sites were still in use. And this is just a representation of the Palace of Knossos and how a peak sanctuary would be visible from a site. Alan Peatfield has created a list of elements that a peak sanctuary would have. 1, on or near the summit of a mountain, he specifies the altitude range between 200 and 1,200 meters being the lowest and tallest sites currently identified. 2, prominence of the mountain and or actual peak sanctuary site. 3, visibility of other peak sanctuaries. 4, clear lines of visibility between the peak sanctuary and settlement areas. 5, accessibility of mountain peak and sanctuary site. 6, proximity to settlements. And 7, proximity to areas of human activity and exploitation. This project will focus on the relationship between these peak sanctuaries during the Neopalatial period, 1700 to 1450 BCE. This period is considered the zenith of Minoan culture, when there was far more political unification than in previous or even future periods. The premise of this proposal is that the political unification of the island would have needed a strong communication network in order to function together. The question is this: why did only certain peak sanctuaries continue into the Neopalatial period, and what was their purpose? Was it the same as the proposed functions for the Proto-Palatial period, or was there more nuance? Over time, the purpose of peak sanctuaries has been discussed by many archaeologists. Stephen Soyton summarizes the most popular beliefs for the functions of these peaks. First, sanctuaries, locations that would have been the space for offerings and sacrifices that function as a part of the Minoan religious program. This is what the majority of Minoan archaeologists believe these peaks were used for. Second, communication centers, high places that allowed a degree of intervisibility between one peak site and at least one, if not multiple, other peak sites. The presence of ash layers found at these sites imply the utilization of fire as a signaling method. Alan Peatfield says that these ash layers were the remains of ritual bonfires to be seen from peak to peak. However, Soitens mentions that they could have been used for more practical uses, like long-range fire signaling, such as beacons for travelers at sea or a lighthouse. And third, astronomical observation centers, nocturnal locations for the observation of celestial events such as solstices or equinoxes. An additional complication in this research is the difficulty in dating a peak site and poor excavations and lack of publishing. Furthermore, Vance Watrous has additionally made the claim that there is a Neopalatial peak sanctuary on top of Effendi Stavromenos, the peak just northeast of the Ha Gorge, and I will show you a map of that later. This would make the total number of Neopalatial peak sanctuary sites 12 instead of 11. This site has also never been used in previous research. Project goals. 1. Use viewshed analysis to investigate the idea of communication networks based on peak sanctuaries, what you can see from a specific point on the land. And second, inspect the coverage provided by such a network. And lastly, interrogate the potential uses of peak sanctuaries that have been proposed in the literature thus far. And methods. I researched known projects on peak sanctuaries, especially those that utilize GIS as a tool. In order to create these viewsheds, I obtained a 20-meter digital elevation model of Crete from the Foundation for Research and Technology Hellas, or Fourth Institute, on Crete that was on the Greek grid coordinate system GCS GGRS 1987. And I just want to note that 20 meters was the highest resolution that I could find, and they had a 12 one, but it completely cut out about all of this part of the land, so I couldn't use that. Here's a flow chart of my process. First, as I mentioned in the previous slide, I researched peak sanctuaries and obtained the DEM of Crete. I then used Google Earth Pro in order to locate each peak site's coordinates. I was able to do this by standing at each peak and using the 3D function to look around the landscape. I also used photos from previous research of these peaks and matched them to the Google Earth Pro renderings. After finding each coordinate on Google Earth Pro, I then converted the KML files into shape files on ArcMap, and also I reprojected them into the same coordinate system as the DEM. In order to test the accuracy of the reprojection, I plotted other points in areas that I knew, such as these small islands off the coast of Crete. And I'm sorry, I'll go back. So this one and this island right here. And that's called, one of it's called Sira. The original points from Google Earth plotted these points somewhere in the ocean. But when I reprojected them, they aligned perfectly with the two islands. I then generated viewshed maps through ArcMap of the 11 proposed Neopalatial peak sanctuaries by Megarry, and as well as the newly claimed site of Stavromenos by Watrous. I chose not to limit the viewshed distance because these sites have excellent views all around. They are the highest points on the island. And when considering fire signaling, these signals could have been seen from great distances. I utilized the viewshed in ArcGIS and Google Earth Pro in order to test these project goals. And so here is a map of the 12 Neopalatial peak sanctuaries, and this one is Brasinias, Gonies Filiorimos, Euctus, Megalos Rositos, Kofinas Sternes. This is the new site of Stavromenos, Prunias, Zycophalo, Playa Zeros, Petsophos, and Modi. I'm aware that I have cut out the western portion of Crete. That is because there are no known peak sanctuaries west of Brasinias, right over here. I felt it was necessary to zoom in as much as possible to the areas in question. This is a combined viewshed of the 11 original peak sanctuary sites without the view from the newly claimed site of Stavromenos. Areas in green indicate that there is visibility in the areas from at least one of the peak sites, and areas in gray indicate that there is no visibility. So, notice that the area that is circled in red has no visibility from any site. So all of this area cannot be seen from a peak site. This indicates no visual link between the peak sites from central and eastern Crete. It makes it difficult to say that they would have been able to communicate across the entirety of the land. However, when I added the site of Effendi Stavromenos to the viewshed, the gap closes. So all of this closes in right there. No one has used this site in previous research. It shows that without this site, the viewshed of the island would have not been connected between central and eastern Crete. This is an individual viewshed of the site of Effendi Stavromenos, where the pink dots over here and the represent sites that are in its visibility, and yellow dots mean that the site cannot see that site. And this shows that Effendi Stavromenos has a direct line of sight from Kofinas to Kofinas Sternes in the southwestern region. So I know it's really crazy, but it can actually see this area right down here. And also all the way to the eastern part of the island. So all the way over here, and it can actually see this one. It's just hard to make that out. Okay. I also performed individual viewsheds for each site in the eastern part of the island, and none have visibility further than Effendi Stavromenos, i.e. they cannot see past this mountain range right here. Given that I cannot show the result of this viewshed in the best detail, I decided to take a photo on Google Earth Pro that illustrates this view from Stavromenos to Kofinas Sternes. This view is as if you were standing on top of Stavromenos and looking towards Kofinas Sternes. If there was indeed smoke, it would be clearly visible from this spot. So anything right there. And this is a map of Kofinas Sternes' view. You can see that the site has a clear view to the peak sanctuary of Euctus, which is right here. Euctus is known as the most important peak site on the island due to its proximity to the main palace of Knossos, which I haven't mapped it, but it would be right around in here. But you saw the photo earlier of those two peaks. Here is a map demonstrating the network from each site to one another. It is evident that the eastern part of the island still has a dense network of peak sanctuaries. So all of right here. Results. The viewshed analysis showed that there are excellent lines of sight in each localized region, so central and the eastern part of the island. In fact, the viewshed analysis also showed intervisibility between the regions of central Crete and eastern Crete. There are no gaps in intervisibility as far west as Gonias Filiorimos, so right here, and as far east as Traustalos and Petsophos, so over here. Also, there is still a high concentration of sites in the eastern part of the island, so all the way over here. Furthermore, the proposed peak site of Effendi Stavromenos appears to be the most important peak site in the communication network. Without it, there would be no connection between East and West Crete. Lastly, the viewshed applications are a valid form of analysis when investigating site-based communication networks. So further research that I did on the peak sites showed that a Minoan road network was being built during the Proto-Palatial period, which is also the time where the peak sanctuary sites were most prominent. And the Minoan road system was fully developed by the end of the same period, and the peaks would have been on or close to these paths. It is peculiar that these road systems would finish and the peaks would decline in the following period, if they were, in fact, communication networks. Megarry also mentions that sites known as Minoan villas, such as Zou and Tilissos, and more grew in significance during the Neopalatial period, while peak sanctuaries decline. These villas were built on the road networks and situated in similar situations to peak sanctuaries, but in lower areas on the mountains. And this is just a picture of, this is a road going into the Palace of Gornja. Conclusions. This research indicates that the peaks were still being used in the Neopalatial period as a multi-regional communication network, potentially utilizing fire and smoke as a signaling method. However, I do not think that this communication would have been merely for ritual purposes or for a guide for sea travelers at sea, as peatfield and Soitons do. I have inferred from my data that their function was to pass messages between sites, detailing quotidian things such as the arrival of traders or broadly economic information or imperative things such as sea invasions or conflict. Furthermore, I am not arguing against the function of a religious center. In fact, they were most likely still used in that way. However, it is clear that these sites served multiple functions. During this time in the Neopalatial period, Knossos, the main palace, was beginning to take control over the island and went about restructuring the communication network of the previous periods, either to update it or to take control of the communication channels. It is likely that the reason the eastern part of the island still has a dense network of peak sanctuaries is because Knossos would have still needed fast communication with their periphery sites. I believe that the way the Minoans restructured their communication went like this. Finishing the road systems and then building villas for stopping points in their travels, for verbal communication versus visual communication. This is how they prevailed in conquering their landscape and finally creating a way to traverse it easily. I believe that they kept the peaks in use until the Villa Road communication system was fully formed. And I'm sorry, this is a picture of the site of Talissos, and I'll show it on the map, but it's actually, it took the place of a proto-palatial peak sanctuary site. I can't remember the name right now, but that site was on a peak, and that was not used in the Neopalatial period, and then they built this site. It is possible that the proto-palatial peak sites that did not continue into the Neopalatial period did not serve as a critical communication method during the proto-palatial period. This interpretation requires further research in order to substantiate this claim. Also, given that this project has relied on data obtained from others' research and Google Earth Pro, the next stage of this research would be to be ground truthing all of these viewsheds. Lastly, in future research, I would like to look at the relationship between peak sanctuaries and settlements. There is a debate about which sites go with which peaks, and I would like to interrogate that. And just say thank you to my advisors, Dr. Jeffrey S. Souls and Dr. Roy Stein and UNC Greensboro. And any questions? Sorry, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like, there's a little bit of redundancy in what people can see.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone investigated whether Rositos and Stavros-Menos have any mutually visible pixels? Like, it seems to me,
Yeah, right here.
kind of in here.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I should, there was,
hiking up there.
in the proto-palatial period, there was a site right here, and then there was a site right here, but they do not continue into the period that I'm talking about. So they, in the 1900 to about 1700 BCE, they were there. Yeah. The longest viewshed. I'm not sure about the distance, but definitely this one. I don't know what. I didn't actually add in any distance parameters because of how far you could see smoke and any kind of signaling like that. But next time I might try to narrow that in. Yes.
So if the site that's questionable
Mm-hmm.
is not a communication point,
Mm-hmm.
you might expect there to be significant cultural differences between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm not sure about that because, so I actually work on a site that would be, okay, so there's a site and it's really small. You can't see it on the DEM, but it's right here and you can see it from that site. And it's a port site, but they're pretty much all connected. All the island wide is connected. You see Knossos, everything kind of stems from Knossos, and then you see a lot of sites copying from the main palace, like their pottery, their methods of creating all of their goods and everything. But there's a palace right here, the one that I showed the road system going to. They're all kind of connected. Like the site that I work at, that was the site that produced all of the stone for that palace, and they're all kind of connected in that way. Did I answer that? I'm sorry. Okay, good. Right. Any more? Okay, thank you.